like this, right?
Yes,
You like
it
it this
works.
way?
Yes, that way is fine.
Not at the center, is it okay?
It doesn't matter. I mean, because you have a background that you want to show, right?
Yeah, but I thought they were going to put their own background anyways. So
Yeah.
that was what I said yesterday. But if they don't, perfect. I like to show my company's background. You can imagine. All right, so we are wait for you for the nudge.
Yeah.
Thank
I
you.
just give time to some of the participants to come in. The finalists are all on board, I believe. Yes. I have Lala B, David Young, Dr. Jade Simi, and yourself, Dr. Gloria Udo, as well, I believe I saw earlier. If it's fine with the panelists, perhaps we agree to start at about 10:30, regardless of the audience.
Please can that music stop? Is a session going on? Gloria Udo. Dialed in, but no. She said she's dialed in, but there's no audio. Okay, so they can start now. Good morning. Good morning. Please, we can start the session now.
Good morning. I believe you're the host, and
Yep.
I can hear you loud and clear.
Yes, ma'am.
Perhaps before you on board, we agreed to start at 10:30
Okay,
so that
okay,
we
ma'am.
can allow for the audience. It's
Okay, then
email that is
that's
here.
perfect, ma'am. Okay, ma'am.
So you work for us as well. And
By the way, you're echoing. I don't know if that will get worse or better when you start.
Right. Okay, just a minute to start. Can you all put on your videos and your audios as well? As much as possible, you leave them on, except when you're not talking. And this is to the panelists. Thank you for doing that. We expect all the panelists to be kicking and their videos to show. I think we have Dr. Gloria Udo still not with us. I've seen her earlier, but I still can't find her. Nevertheless, we must start. Distinguished panelists, welcome, welcome, welcome once again. I'm very excited to be your moderator for today. Welcome to the Enyibeti Lagos State Economic Summit for 2021. Again, let's remind ourselves the topic is mainstreaming sustainability in governance and business. And if you allow me, I would like to set the tone. More importantly is to recognize that the combination of panelists that you are part of today is deliberate, and it's to take on as much as possible your experience in private sector and in your business, and to deliver that, with a mindset of supporting and helping and informing Lagos State to be a better subnational. So the idea behind bringing us together is to take away from us all of those experiences, all of those learnings that Lagos State as a state government can use, around governance to foster its sustainability growth, and also to interact with the sustainable development agenda. That is my tone for today. As I said earlier, I expect that videos will be on. Like I said, Lagos State is particularly with our main host and listening. So if participants don't join, that's still fine. We will still go ahead. Like David asked, we will retain our expectation of time. I will ask the questions that have been shared with you earlier, and we expect you to spend about 5 minutes in each of them. Subsequently, when we've done the first round of questions, if I have 2 questions for you, I would also be asking the second one, and if we have time. After that, we open the floor for questions. I believe it should be as interactive as possible, so we can ask each other questions as panelists as well, to bring out the usefulness and the value of content that Lagos State deserves in all of this. So that is my welcome point and address. If I may start, I would like to start with Mrs. Titilola Alabi. She is the Sustainability and Public Affairs Manager for Diageo Nigeria. Titilola, you're welcome once again.
Thank you, Morris. Hi, everyone. Good morning.
It's always nice to see you. Thank you for joining us.
Okay.
So let me just delve into the question as soon as possible. Now, this a question. Your question is a bit rhetoric. So, do you agree with the assumption that we can achieve a win-win solution between businesses and their objectives, and also sustainability?
Okay, so thank you for that question, Morris. And thank you to the organizers of this summit, and appreciate everyone else on the call. And so in answering this question, I want to cast our minds back to a concept that I'm sure we're a bit familiar with, and it's the concept of the Venn diagram. At some point in either primary school or secondary school, we were taught about the Venn diagram. And so it's basically where you have two or more circles or categories and that have differences but also have similarities. And the sweet spot is that middle center where you can identify the things that the two circles or the two categories have in common. And that sweet spot is what you call, in sustainability parlance, is what you call rather creating shared value. And basically it speaks to that element where a business can find where its business interest intersects with society's interest. And so there's always that opportunity for businesses to create that win-win between fostering the need to generate revenue and to continue to run as a business, but also helping society. And to bring this home, I will share a couple of examples of what we do in our organization and, of course, what I have seen around the world. So as a business, one of our core ingredients is sorghum. And before now, we would typically import every, bit of ingredient or material that goes into the production of any one of our brands. Well, in the past 10 years, we wanted to grow our local sourcing, initiative. And so we started working with small local farmers in different parts of the country. We built up their capacity, invested in their businesses, and over time, these farmers have been able to grow over 80% of the amount of sorghum that we need in our business. And so what started as a need for us to guarantee our supply chain has also impacted on this category of people. And so that's one example. Another example would be that readily comes to mind is what we do, the investments we do in education. And so for the past 10, 20 years, we have consistently invested in education. And what has happened over time is we have kind of used that element, which seemed more like a corporate social responsibility program, but also to guarantee our own supply of talent. So a good chunk of those people that we sponsored all through the university are currently working within the business in our engineering function. And so if you look at it critically, there's always that sweet spot, there's always that intersection, there's always that opportunity to create a win-win solution, both for the business who is investing and also in a way that would benefit society in the long run. I think you're muted, Morris. You're still muted.
Sorry, the host, you need to stop that. Please, can you automatically allow us to do this? We don't have participants, so we're fine. Can you not interfere with the audio? Because I couldn't unmute. That's what I was. That's also I was using my hand, but I think it's fine now. Thank you so much, Titi. What I hear you say is that indeed there can be a win-win solution between organizations' objectives and sustainability. The next question, which I want you to think about, is around. So, if you were the heart of the public sector, Lagos State to be particular, what kind of challenges do you think that Lagos State can have that can prevent them from enabling this win-win solutions at a sub-national level? But that's not now. We'll come back to that. I want you to think through around that. The next question, and the panelists I would like to talk right now, I hope, it looks like Dr. Gloria Udo is trying to join, but she's having connection problems. So I will go to Mr. David Young, MD and Senior Partner of BCG. Mr. David Young, you're welcome once again. We're very delighted to have you with us.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here and to be among this great panel. Let me, yes.
Okay, perfect. Were you going to say something before my question?
No, please go ahead.
All right. Now we've heard that and we've read some of your articles, particularly one that talks to the concept of total societal impact, CSI. Can you elaborate a bit about it within the public sector context? So, and also bring out, as you elaborate, how Lagos State, as a state government or a subnational, can leverage this total societal impact, concept in its sustainable development planning, what we call sustainability from an organizational perspective. Over.
Yes, certainly, Morris. Thank you so much for the question. Let me quickly cover what total societal impact is, why it's important now, what it means for state planning, and then offer 4 questions that may inform that planning for sustainability. And the overall takeaway from my remarks should be that the more companies are encouraged to embrace and practice a wider understanding of value to see their total societal impact, the more they become important partners to the public sector in sustainability planning and the planning that Lagos State needs to undertake for its sustainability. So what is total societal impact? It's about understanding the sum of the economic, environmental, and societal benefits and costs a company creates through its products, services, what the company does, and how it does it. We heard good examples mentioned by our last panelist. We can similarly apply the concept of TSI as a lens in looking at an investment, a project, a government initiative, or policy. And the concept is particularly important in this decade of action as we try to achieve the sustainable development goals as countries, as cities, and as the world. So total societal impact examines 6 dimensions of how a company, investment, or policy contributes to sustainability and sustainable development. Think of it to the common good, the overall footprint for the common good. And these dimensions are economic vitality, not just job creation, but expanding the economic activity of the full ecosystem. Lifetime well-being, yes, health, but also all the things that contribute to the fulfillment, dignity, joy, security of the citizenry over a lifetime. The third, environmental sustainability, for everything from smart resource use to climate change to preserving biodiversity. The fourth, ethical capacity, how it reinforces the ethical systems of society, behaviors, justice, and equity. The fifth, societal enablement, how it enables society to connect to and function more effectively and efficiently. And then, of course, access and inclusion, which all about expanding access, equity, participation of people in communities. So good companies, good investments, good products or policies create more of those things alongside financial return. They are better agents for sustainable development. So for companies, these dimensions can also explicitly connect to what drives their growth, their value creation, and their business advantage. So this promotes total societal impact, or what we call TSI instead of TSR, total shareholder return. TSI promotes a wider perspective, one that considers stakeholders alongside share owners, longer time horizons over short-termism, sustainability and resilience over financial optimization for today. And so for businesses, combining those 2 goals of shareholder return expands the idea of value, and businesses considering stakeholders, considering their TSI, create more common ground for dialogue with the public sector on policymaking that is good for business and good for the common good. And increasing that common good, increasing the returns on capital deployed, then helps build a more resilient, sustainable private sector. And if well done in the state's planning, a stronger, more resilient Lagos State. And why apply it now? Because of everything we heard on the last panel. The societal context has changed for business, and the very challenges we heard about, the risks from unmet societal and environmental needs, whether that's the changing climate that we've talked about, or the stress on resources, or the need to accelerate job creation and the inclusion of youth, all these things require a new way to approach the problem. And that's where sustainable development planning has to focus. How do you close the gap between the large societal challenges and the country's aspirations and the state's aspirations to meet them? And government, as we've said, can't do this alone. It'll take the capabilities, the innovation, the scale, and speed of the private sector. And so putting SDG 17 into practice, partnering to achieve the goals. Now, there's 4 questions that I would submit are useful for in-state sustainability planning that the public sector can ask. The first, our sustainability planning, is it creating an environment that encourages our private sector, big companies and SMEs, towards sustainability and resilience? For instance, by promoting disclosure, prompting businesses to sign on to the UN Global Compact's 10 principles covering human rights, labor, anti-corruption, and environment. Are we celebrating the companies evidencing their sustainability commitments and what they're contributing to the goals of LEGO State? Secondly, have we made clear to our business community our sustainable development goals and identified where and how the private sector is needed and can contribute? And having done so, then has that been built into the state sustainability planning? Third, are we courageously conceiving and trying new models of public-private capital and social partnership? From accelerating employment to constructive sustainable infrastructure to regenerative agriculture to nutritional security, enabling sustainable cities. And are we acting to de-risk the private sector's participation? And the last question then within this planning should be, are we applying a total societal impact lens in assessing the state's projects, the investments, the policies, and the decision-making, so that we do together brings economic vitality, lifetime well-being, environmental sustainability, ethical capacity, societal enablement, and more access and inclusion into reality for a sustainable future? Answering those questions is a way to have effective sustainability planning for the state, and it'll advance a more resilient business sector for the common good. Back to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, David. That was really quite useful. What I hear you say is that the more we explore and attempt to define value as far as even understanding what sustainability means on a day-to-day basis in our businesses, the richness and the robustness of that value, cascades to even our dialogue with the state government, Lagos State to be particular in all of this. And I think that's a really important takeaway for businesses, that it doesn't end in that particular business. And I recall that the conversation I had earlier with Dr. Chioma Nwanchukwu talking about some of the stakeholders who are industry leaders in all of this. The conversation shouldn't be expected to impact only businesses. It should impact the society at large, like TSI, talking about eco-vitality, talking about ethical capacity, societal enablement, access, inclusion, lifetime well-being, and so on and so forth. I think those are really 6 good dimensions that you also, that TSI talks to. I would encourage each one of us to spend time to look at it, if it's available, of course. So much once again, Mr. David Young. At this moment, I would like to go to Dr. Chioma Nwanchukwu. Dr. Chioma Nwanchukwu, you're welcome once again. Dr. Chioma is the GM of External Affairs and Communications. She's also the Director of Annual Gas Processing Company, AGPC of SEPLAT. Dr. Chioma, your question. What are the broad stakeholder groups that you consider should be convened by Lagos State, which you spoke to earlier, for sustainable development and sustainability, like you have it from a business point of view? First question, please, over to you.
Thank you very much, Maurice. I'm very happy to be at this, have this opportunity to speak at a very important topic. And to that, I say thank you to the Lagos Economic Summit organizers for having a very topical, important topic, which talks about what do we do for the next decade. Because when you talk about sustainability, you need to talk about long-term planning. You have to have long-term perspectives. So talking about the next decade means we need to look at things right now that can affect us in the next coming years. Before I set the sun to say who are the stakeholders, it'd be good to just give a bit of context around what is sustainability. Sustainability we want to provide for ourselves now, but make sure we don't endanger the ability of all the people coming behind us, our own children, taking care of themselves in the future. So that said, I'm happy when Titi talked about the circles. I also like to talk about the circles. There are three major pillars of sustainability. We talk about economic viability, we talk about environmental protection, we talk about social equity. If you look at the heart of it, is sustainability. So it's good we're looking at this topic because for Lagos State is a very important state, is a unique state, it's a small state, but it accounts for a home for about 10% of Nigerians and economic players. Lagos State is small, but it has over 27.4% of urban dwellers. And Lagos State houses is just the economic hub of the nation, contributes about 30% of the GDP. So when you look at this, it has a lot of prospects at the same time challenges. And the challenges, of course, will be provision of water, health, quality education. Somebody mentioned about the SDGs, all the SDGs, zero hunger, no poverty. So it comes with a lot of challenges that borders on sustainability development. And of course, coming from the oil company, I'll talk about energy. Energy becomes very crucial to provide for the Lagos State the large population we talked about. That leads to us commending Lagos State for signing a recent MOU with a British-funded agency on making sure more people have access to energy. Bringing it home to my own company, Seplat, if you look behind me, my screensaver, that is a big, huge gas plant that the company built in 2015. We have progressively made massive investment in gas. And what our gas is doing is providing energy and account for 30% of the energy you have in Nigeria today. So you have organizations that are trying to make things happen around sustainability, because if we don't, it creates a lot of problems for environmental degradation, a lot of problems with social inequality, a lot of problems that the businesses cannot even survive. So when we look at this, it brings us to say, who then can be the stakeholders we need to have on the table if we need to talk about sustainability? Again, I would like to build my picking who will be on the table by looking at a very important framework, the ESG. ESG is talking about environment, the social, and the governance. So if you're going to measure to know if sustainability is happening and happening effectively, you're going to measure your ESG. So all those stakeholders who matter around it, I would like to draw the stakeholders from an advice on where to get our stakeholders if we want to discuss sustainability. The first one is the principles of governance. If we need to look at governance, governing is sustainability for it to be productive and impactful. We need to look at governance. And governance means the government itself, the government at all levels, the state, the federal, the nation, the local government, they have to be massive players in making sure that the sustainability issues we're talking about is at the point where you can be sure is sustained. So they have to have legislation. What would they do for us? Policy formulation. You have to have policies that formulate how people walk around sustainability to be ensured that they're doing the right thing and encourage them to do the right thing and celebrate them when they do the right thing. So there has to be governance. If you look at the other one, planet, preserving the environment, you need to bring to the table those who are environmental specialists, those agencies that work on protecting the environment. The regulatory agencies have to be on the table. We need to look at waste management. We all live in Lagos. We know what we encounter with waste. Our gutters are blocked, the drains are blocked. The government is trying to put in a structure to manage waste. So when you talk about sustainability, sustaining for a long time, you need to bring these people to the table to do more talk around how do we get this done and done effectively. You look at another pillar, the people. So who are the people we need to have on the table? Again, you look at the media. The media is very important because the media and the traditional leaders, as well as faith leaders, the churches, these people have a large sphere of influence because of the large people they can reach. You need to bring them to the table because we need to encourage people to stop anti-sustainability practices. And knowledge is power. So those people will create the knowledge that is needed to get people away from doing things that are not sustainable and encourage them to do what is sustainable. So not a set of people to bring to the table at prosperity. There we look at the medium, the small, the large businesses. And of course, you look at the donors, you look at the fund the funding managers you can bring to the table. Because we're talking about infrastructure that can deliver the SDGs. And when you deliver the SDGs, you, of course, will be doing something that will impact on social equity, that will impact on environmental protection, something that will impact on economic viability. So by the time the state look at opportunity of bringing these broad-based stakeholders to the table, it will give greater shared value. It will also give ownership, because when you own it, you make sure it happens accordingly. So it gets a consensus around a larger number of people. So I think, Maurice, is a very important question. The right people at the table will make sure we get the right results.
Thank you so much, Dr. C. I like that angle, and this was in my forward. I like the angle of using the lens of the ESG to first of all demonstrate value and what is required, what is expected, and then channeling it into the public sector space and into Lagos as a subnational, being able to identify who the players are those pillars as far as ESG is concerned: environment, social, governance particularly, and the practicality tone that you add to it, religious bodies, faith institutions. I mean, in another environment, they might not be key, but as far as Nigeria is concerned and as far as Africa is concerned, I mean, it's high time we start telling one another that you cannot ignore them. You simply cannot. I mean, they are very influential. And the earlier we domesticate all of this sustainability language and sustainability practices, the earlier we recognize the importance of localizing them and making them work at every level, be it base of the pyramid, be it at the top level, the earlier, the better for all of us, particularly. So I really thank you for that insight. I'm going to go to the next part of your question at another round. So please get ready to also talk to that. The next panelist I would like to address us will be Dr. Amy Jadesimi. Dr. Amy, you're very welcome once again. Dr. Amy is the Managing Director of LEDOL and Commissioner Business and Sustainable Development Commission. And your question, Dr. Amy, what are the regulatory and policy frameworks that Lagos State needs to adopt to foster growth and replication of strategies for moving sustainable development from a border level that we are in to a mainstreaming level that will go to be? Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. So first of all, to put this into context, to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, we have to embrace the fact that private sector is going to be the driver. In a country like Nigeria, in a state like Lagos, it's the private sector, large to small, that's going to achieve it. In fact, the World Bank confirmed several years ago now that the 680 million jobs that are needed across the world, 80% of them would be created by SMEs. So in that context, Nigeria and Lagos are both, you know, in a very, very good situation and a very bad situation. So let's start with the bad and move on to the good. So the bad is that in a high growth, low income country like Nigeria, we have a status quo that is characterized by people making a lot of money from market failure. And that market failure is not only unsustainable, it's actually damaging to the environment, to our economy, you know, it's bad. The good is that to switch away from that, for private sector to bring us better solutions is relatively easy. Because when people are profiting from market failure, they're creating a situation that is uncompetitive. So the policies that Lagos State adopts must be directly targeted towards correcting these market failures. And the beauty of the huge untapped potential in Lagos is that in order to do that, you literally just need to remove the hurdles, stopping the private sector from being able to participate in the market. And again, those hurdles are put there to protect market failures and certain interests. And if we don't face that, we're not going to get anywhere. So you need to remove those hurdles, and then you need to enable the private sector. And again, the private sector, I think, needs very little in the way of enabling, some very basic things. Access to financial capital. And this does not have to be a lot of money, because in Lagos, we do have a thriving market that is currently being kept artificially small because people are paying a lot of money for very little. And I was privileged to participate in the creation of a study in 2016 and 17 that resulted in a report called Better World, Better Business, Better World. And it essentially showed the global opportunities in sustainable businesses that private sector could tap into. And if private sector taps into these opportunities in just 4 verticals, $12 trillion of additional value will be released. So in other words, there are vast amounts of money, far more money to be made from operating sustainably than is needed to create sustainable businesses. Lagos State has everything in place for these private sector companies to deliver these sustainable solutions in healthcare, in energy, in urbanization and materials, in agriculture. So Lagos State has a proven market, and we also have many, many entrepreneurs that have somehow managed to survive despite what has sometimes been an inhospitable market for private sector specifically. Now, beyond that, I think Lagos State needs to adopt practices that enable them to tap into the vast sums now available globally for sustainable development. So when we say that private sector needs access to finance, I do believe that there is sufficient local finance for a lot of private sector to get off the ground if it's properly structured. But Lagos State itself can put policies in place that enable private sector companies to tap into international sustainable funds. Now, I'm also on the steering committee for the UNDP on Sustainable Development Goals, and the UNDP has developed a standard for sustainability. And they've also put together a map. They've done a mapping exercise of the whole world, but they're doing Nigeria at the moment, where they've identified sustainable business opportunities. So if Lagos State partners with the UNDP on this and puts their policy power behind support for the work that, for example, UNDP, I know others are doing it, but UNDP has gone quite far down the road. If they support UNDP from a policy perspective, they will enable these private sector organizations to be able to tap into these funds much easier, because all Lagos State has to do is create a platform where they say they are going to protect the opportunities identified by the UNDP. They are going to ensure that any policies currently on the books that seem to stop these companies from accessing the market will be looked at. And you can essentially create a paradigm where the private sector is able to go to international investors with a framework developed by UNDP and Lagos State that proves that the business they're doing is sustainable because they tick all the boxes on the UNDP's checklist. Right. And that will then make them bankable internationally. And if they're bankable internationally, they can tap into literally billions, hundreds of billions of dollars that are now targeting sustainable companies. So in other words, I think we have all the tools out there. We've identified the opportunities. We know what we need to do. We know what we need to stop doing. I think now it's about implementation. And I think taking the work from the Business and Sustainable Development Commission, taking the work that UNDP has done and putting that into Lagos State policy will enable private sector to then take things to the next level. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's been quite insightful. I mean, I particularly was taken by the angle around ensuring that those policies that Lagos State decides to make going forward needs to address market failures as the first and foremost thing that I hear, and I like that. Particularly is to not be dissuaded with um, that unction to focus on new businesses, new sustainable businesses, but make a lot of efforts around getting the existing businesses to be sustainable. I think that's a real big deal. I think the market is there, and ignoring the failed aspect of the market and wanting to just quickly all the time, bring in new ones, and by itself is not a sustainable practice. I think you're quite right when you say that the existing market space, the existing businesses needs to be supported with policies that enables them to do their work well and in a sustainable manner. Thank you so much for that insight. I will come back to you with another question, just to shed a bit more light on some of the good things that you spoke to. But I would like to go to the last but not the least speaker for today, Dr. Gloria Udo. I hope, yeah, now you're properly connected. Dr. Gloria Udo, you're welcome once again. Dr. Gloria Udo is a social performance manager at Shell. And I will directly go to your question. So Dr. Gloria Udo, if you have to recommend a priority action for Lagos, an action for Lagos to focus on, to mainstream sustainable development and growth, what exactly would that action be? And which of the parastatals or the states prioritize as positioned to scale the size of impact required? And why would you be prioritizing this particular agency?
Okay, thank you. Let me start first by thanking everyone for this invitation to speak at this very important summit. And before I start to talk about Lagos State, let me just go back a bit to Nigeria, and then I come back to the context of Lagos State. The reason being that every geography, every country chooses the kinds of sustainable development goal to focus on, depending on its development realities, and of course the what is happening in the body polity at the time. So if you look at Nigeria, for instance, in 2020, there was a voluntary national review on how we're doing with SDGs done by the UN, and it was very clear that Nigeria has been focusing on 7 key goals. I wouldn't bother to look at the key goals. So when you look at Lagos State, for instance, what comes to my mind as a priority goal before we get to the action is actually Sustainable Development Goal 11, that actually focuses on sustainable cities and communities. And if you see the way Lagos has been, targets are already being worked on in terms of the targets around this goal, such as transportation, such as housing and all of that. But today I'd like to also say that the waste management has been worked on. I see it as a huge opportunity for Lagos State going forward. The reason being that if you look at Lagos, for instance, it's on record that about 30 million tons of waste are generated daily. And if we also look at what is happening, we would see that only about 30% is actually collected. So in terms of what I would recommend is actually around waste management. And how do I want to talk about that? If you look at waste management, there are so very many opportunities in terms of what I call the 3 possible scenarios that also add up to sustainable development. There is the opportunity to recycle and create new products. There's also the opportunity to also develop organic products to support agriculture. And then there's the big thing around renewable energy. And if you look at it already, it also says we would have to, going forward, probably decentralize into hubs that can actually take on this action in terms of beyond, if you look at the recycling objective, for instance, that is a key part that private sector collaborators can work on in terms of identifying the types of waste that are useful to carry out, to act and partner with the government in terms of handling that going forward. Then if you look at the pillar that talks about renewable energy, if we're working around hubs, that can also be an opportunity to actually not just create employment, but begin to address the energy needs of Lagos. Because increasingly, if you look at even our nation, it is very clear that the grid would never get to the extent to which we need it to supply the energy needs of the nation. So taking Lagos, for instance, that probably accounts for maybe on an odd day, maybe up to 10–15% of the national population. What are the other sources of energy that we can actually leverage on? And with the amount of waste being generated, is that an option that we can begin to look at in terms of creating energies at household, encouraging the creation of energies at hub and at household levels going forward to complement what may not actually happen in the future in terms of the capability of a national grid to cope with our energy demands. And of course, if you look at the agricultural yield itself to SDG 17, where possible partners can also come in, some action is already being done, but I'd like to also share something I found very interesting looking at the Nordic countries and how they've taken an approach to waste management. So if you look at the Nordic countries, for instance, they have what is called an inverted triangle, an inverted funnel, where the most preferred option is actually to avoid and minimize, and the least preferred is actually to dispose. So we need to be working going forward in terms of what the three buckets are in between the avoid and the dispose, which talks about reusing the waste, treating the waste, and also in terms of new products that arise from waste disposals. So that's for me what I would recommend in addition to what Lagos is doing already, because like I said before, it's not one priority action. There are so many actions that add up to sustainability, particularly for a state like dispose. We talked about announcements that arise from waste disposals, particularly if you like in the nation in terms of setting the agenda around sustainable development.
Hello.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gloria Udo. I like that. We can't agree that it's one.
Hello, can you hear me?
It is indeed more than one, and I hear that you prioritized particularly the environmental space, the energy space, as well as the agricultural space. And I totally agree with you. I hope Lagos State is listening to scale the size of impact that we think is necessary. Those three areas need to be focused on, just as Dr. Gloria Udo has mentioned. Thank you once again, Dr. Gloria Udo. I'm going to go to the second round. I hope we survive it. So very quickly, back to Titi Alabi of Diageo. Titi, can you tell us what the challenges are that you speculate can prevent Lagos from enabling these win-win solutions on a subnational level?
Thank you, Morris. Thank you for that question, Morris. So if I hear you clearly, I'd like to rephrase that and maybe speak to what I hear you say, which is, what are the ways that Lagos State really can enhance a win-win solution between the state and private sector? And I'll kind of pick different points from what each of the speakers have already spoken to. So one of the things Dr. Jadisimi mentioned was the around clearly articulating the cheese so that it is clear what the size of the pie is. So in business parlance, you hear things like, what is the size of the pie? Are we going after? Because it kind of shows you what is at stake and what you all stand to benefit from. And let's be very clear about this. In reference to what Dr. Daisime said, there was a forum of global CEOs and civil leaders that came together at the instance of the United Nations a couple of years ago. And the outcome of that engagement was a report that actually showed the value in terms of how much could be made from achievement of the SDGs. And just like she said, there is a value of about $12 billion to be made just from the achievement of 12 trillion. That is an extraordinary amount of money, but it's also an extraordinary amount of opportunities. And so Lagos State may want to say to itself, or maybe from a country context to start with, Nigeria may want to say, what portion of that value do I want to up as a country? And then from a state perspective, Lagos State is saying, what portion of that do I want to appropriate as a state, both for the state and also businesses that work within the state? And so having that mindset of there being a clear opportunity around the achievement of the SDGs just gets us thinking more around solutions rather than the challenges.
Right.
The second point I want to make around this is also around how we must adopt a more proactive or productive approach in terms of supporting private capital rather than trying to steer it in the particular direction. And that's where you see where there's that opportunity to say, these are the goals, what are the opportunities to collaborate, to work together in achieving these goals? And in speaking to that, something that comes to my mind is a documentary that I saw while growing up. So more than a decade ago, I spent a lot of my time outside of Lagos State. So my secondary school and university and NYSC, all of that was outside of Lagos. And so for the first time, after getting back to living fully in Lagos State, one of these days I was seated right in front of the television, not particularly paying attention, but, just watching. And then a documentary came up and it was put together by a religious organization. And even though they were talking about something entirely different, that particular documentary was a turning point for me in terms of how I think about sustainability. And it's kind of shaped my outlook. Because in that documentary, it painted the picture of the Lagos of our dreams. And so you could see pictures of street lights working, of well-tarred roads and beautiful high-rise buildings, of
Right.
children running around in beautiful parks and gardens. It's so compelling. It was so compelling. And myself, this is the first time I am seeing very clearly the possibilities that exist in the Lagos of our dreams. And that brings me to the final point around a model that other countries, especially the OECD countries, have kind of implemented, which is around the collective impact model. Now, there are 5 elements of the collective impact model, but I will speak to one which I feel is very critical. And that's the issue, and that's the piece around the collective agenda. What is that collective agenda that Lagos State is driving that is common knowledge to everyone that is involved? It's easier to walk towards what you are aware of rather than something that is only known to a particular sector or a particular part of the populace.
Right.
And so it's really critical to create that common agenda, to sell that vision, and to bring everyone who needs to be on board to be a part of that vision. And a bit
I must stop you there. Otherwise, we will go on and on, even though we do appreciate the angle.
All right, then.
And
Thank
if I
you,
may
Morris.
summarize it, I love it. I love the fact that you turned around the challenges into opportunities, because indeed, I mean, you see a lot of opportunities where challenges are. And maybe the lens that Lagos State should wear is to also identify these challenges as opportunities, like you mentioned. So I really like that. I thank you for that value dimension as well. Understanding how much opportunities you have at stake also enables you. I mean, and I think you're wearing the heart of the private sector. We know how we're geared by the value of opportunities and how we want to take action because there's a stake in it for us. And so perhaps Lagos State also needs to wear that kind of heart and begin to measure impact or the value of a particular activity by how much it means to them and how much opportunities are in there for them. Once again, thank you, Titilola Alabi, for that insight. I will quickly go to Mr. David Young again. And David Young, what I want you to do for us is to take one of your dimensions, one of the 6 dimensions. And in my mind, I have the 1 minute, please. The lifetime well-being dimension. I want you to talk to it relatively to how you see Lagos State benefiting from this particular area of total societal impact. Over to you.
Yeah, no, thank you very much, Morris. Excellent discussion on this. So when we talk about lifetime well-being, and that is a lens, if I'm a company and I think about the impact of my products, my services, the way I'm running my business, and the impact that my business has across its, whether it's its supply chain, its distribution channel, with its customers, in its ecosystem, then I want to be thinking about exactly what is that creating, what is it enabling, and what is it doing to enhance the wealth, or to enhance the well-being, the health, the ability of the, whether it's an employee or a supplier or a customer, to practice, to engage, to enjoy a fuller life. And if I think about it in that way, then it causes me to try to innovate and say, gee, I don't want to think of my product as small. I want to think of my product as something that can enable a better, healthier, richer, fuller life of opportunity and well-being for all those that are connected to my company. And it's same applies to policy, right? So if I'm creating a particular policy to deal with a market failure, or a policy that is to deal with a project or an investment in a piece of infrastructure, I should be asking myself, what are the rings of lifetime well-being that I can create through that particular investment and that particular project? So what we find is that the intentional act of thinking about those impacts actually creates innovation. It creates solutioning. It creates a way to think about opportunity rather than it being a restriction. And to pick up on the point that was just made, when I do that, I then am in a position to connect to the goals that I now understand that are priorities for a sustainable Lagos state, a sustainable Lagos city. And so it's important that from a planning perspective, it's important that we have a definition of well-being. There's been work done on something called the SEDA, the Sustainable Economic Development Assessment, which actually showed that those planning processes that prioritize well-being, and well-being defined across 17 parameters, that those planning processes prioritize well-being also generate better growth and GDP. And so when I invest the wealth, if you will, of the country, when I enable that wealth of the country and I devote it toward well-being, I get these other national products. Sometimes we reverse that process, right? Sometimes we're only thinking about, well, how do I stimulate GDP? What I should be thinking about is, how do I stimulate well-being? And the byproduct of that well-being then are these other economic effects, right? That we can see. So it's a little bit of a backwards logic, but from maybe the way we are traditionally trained. Yeah. But if you think about the way we've been trained, in general, we haven't been trained for sustainability. We've been trained for shorter term returns, and we've been retained to think and optimize for the now, rather than actually optimize for our well-being and sustainability.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much, Mr. David Young. And particularly that dimension because of the times we're in, you know, and the reality that the world was struck by, you know, something that affected people's well-being, people's health, and the world stood still. I mean, if we only can quantify how much economically the world has lost, and then bring it down to a continental state, bring it down to a regional level, and then bring it down to a country level, and then a subnational, that's just like Titi also mentioned, helps us to value, you know, the loss. And the moment you're able to value the loss, you can, you know, connect it back to the human being, to that well-being of every individual across businesses, across municipalities, across, you know, subnationals, and so on and so forth. I really think it's an important area that it's been neglected for long. And I think nature by itself brought, you know, the reality to us, staring at us in the face. And if we fail to do that mathematics now and begin to value life as well and value well-being, even after these results of loss, I think we still have a long way to go. So thank you so much. Thank you for that dimension. I think it's a very important one that we need to talk to as far as sustainability is concerned, both at every layer, either country level or a business level. Thank you once again for that. My next question will go to Dr. Chioma Nwachukwu for the second round. And my question to you, Dr. C, is what will be the optimal role? And I know you mentioned it, you know, in your first remarks, of Lagos State assessed around being a convener, an input provider, and a funder, particularly a convener. So that talks to, you know, the stakeholdership and all of that. What do you think they should do practically? Over to you.
Okay, thank you very much again, Maurice. Interesting conversation across all the speakers, and what it clearly shows is that Lagos State do, of course, have many roles to play. A lot of roles to play, not just as a convener, but as a convener is important because what that does is gets the discussion going. It gets the discussion, you know, gets the people who need to discuss and talk about sustainability on the table to have that conversation. And without the conversation, you cannot really make as much progress as you want. So they talk about being a convener, just like what they have done, they need to do it all over and all over again. And what is also shown by everybody's contribution is that they don't, or they can't possibly do this alone. There has to be a major element of collaboration. So they need to convene people to speak about sustainability. They need to know how to collaborate to bring the best out of that convening they need to do. Then we talk about them being facilitators. If you look at all the stakeholders we mentioned about, you need to understand how you can facilitate each of the stakeholders to bring the best out of them. And when you talk about sustainability, to bring about the sustainability development we're talking about, each person has to be seen as a contributor. How do you facilitate each contributor to make his or her own contribution as an entity or as an individual? So in addition to being a convener or facilitator, they can also look at legislation. And legislation for me is in two folds. You have that which shall protect, which will enable, sustainable development discussions or actions to happen and happen as we want it. We also look at legislation that we promote businesses, because look at businesses, it has to be viable. So you need to have legislation that is making them viable so they can be a success. And when they're a success, they contribute their own quota much more capably. Another role the government can play, you have already said, the input provider. Yes, of course, they can serve as resources. We talked about waste management, what they can do. The last speaker, one of the speakers also looked at what they can do in different ways. They can be the provider and spearhead a lot of different developments that can go around sustainability. So that is a major role they can play. That also goes with the funding. And Lagos State last year put a lot of inflow from outside the country. So they have the capacity to raise funds. They have to use funds judiciously to do things that are sustainable. So funding goes with it for Lagos State. They can be the provider, even the state television, the media, because we need everybody on this journey. The media can have state televisions, they can create special programs that borders on sustainability, that can galvanize the people so everybody understands what we're talking about when it comes to sustainability. Then I come to monitoring and regulatory oversight. Monitoring is very key. Monitoring, see, companies produce what you know, as you know, Maurice, the sustainability reports. We are surplus since 2012 on our own. We willingly produce our sustainability reports. And the sustainability report goes to show what you have done as an organization to, in terms of the economic viability, the social equity, all the social programs we run. We, we show what we did the year before. And if you know you're going to have a sustainability report for the year before and you didn't do anything, this year you must do something. So companies should be held accountable. There should be some element of monitoring. There should be an element of reporting, quarterly, half yearly, or yearly, of how companies are doing. That's respect. And of course, impact assessment can't be overlooked. Lagos State must serve that role of impact assessment. What you don't measure, you can't get taken care of. So you must measure it. You're also aware, we worked with you at a time, 1 year to impact assessment of our programs. We were very sure we are dealing with our communities, our host communities. We were sure that we're doing a lot of programs in health, in education, in capacity building, in infrastructural development. But we said, let's assess it, let's measure it and know what it is doing. So Lagos State can be at the forefront of making sure you assess it. What doesn't get measured doesn't taken care of. So they must measure it. And I know you're trying to be mindful of time. Another important one. You see, the stakeholder communication and engagement is critical. We should have town halls. They should have more of this, but in smaller pockets. What we have done now, we have brought the private sector, they have brought the Lagos State, and we have this large conference, which is perfect. But you need to break it down again and make sure that you have opportunities to have the smaller, conveying people in smaller places so you can discuss about sustainability. You go to schools. Schools are very critical. The children of today are the adults of tomorrow. So you go to those places and make sure that the educators, the curriculum, everything has sustainability input and built into it. And lastly, for me, another role you have to play is leadership. You know, to show leadership. Where there are successes around sustainability, celebrate it. And where there are rules to say there's something we need to do to be sure that leadership, sustainability is happening, be at the forefront of it. So these are very different roles that if Lagos State plays it, they are doing a lot of it already. As I said, this conference is a testimony that they have taken on to do a critical role to make sure that sustainability is a topical issue that's well taken care of. But they can do more and the opportunities to do more. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chairman Wachuku. I like that. The optimal role of Lagos State, assessed around being a convener, an info provider, and funder. I hear you talk about particularly the media. And you're right. I mean, it does look like the media is being underutilized in this part of the world as far as the sustainability drive is concerned. And I say that because, I mean, look at what Titi said earlier. She said she watched a documentary and it stayed with her for over a decade in how she thinks about sustainability. She saw a Lagos that the Lagos of tomorrow. And that has stayed with her. That's the power of, media, documentaries, of television, print media, and so on and so forth. And perhaps this is a message to Lagos State to look inwardly more of how much they can take advantage and use outreaches like the media to navigate and to kind of profess that sustainability parlance and sustainability wall, into a multi-stakeholder approach. Again, there's still some people in this part of Lagos that will tell you that they've never heard about sustainability before. And we can't afford to still have that. And it just goes to say that it's not spoken for enough in the places where they need to speak about it. I like the fact that you talk to monitoring and impact assessment. What doesn't get measured is not, doesn't get, calls to order. And this is a message also to Lagos State. Why shouldn't Lagos State be that subnational that wants to start, I heard that Kaduna has done it too, so I don't want to say Lagos State is first. The first sustainability report. It's something to look into. So they should be, and at UN level, I do know that they do welcome sustainability reports at subnational levels. So again, I hope Lagos State is hearing quite clearly that these areas should be looked at for them to make the optimal impact and to carry out the optimal role that is expected of them. Thank you once again, Dr. Choma Nwachukwu. We still have a few more minutes. I'm still on my second round, and I dare not miss Dr. Amy Jadesimi, trickling from the first set of insights that you provided. Particularly, I want you to talk to these hurdles that you have spoken about that can be, that hindering factor for the private sector to optimize the opportunities that are just really around us in Lagos. As Dr. C or somebody mentioned earlier, there are over 200 million in Nigeria, and 30% of them are here in Lagos State. So when you talk about these hurdles that needs to be stopped to enable private sector to do better, to see the opportunities clear, what do you think, particularly Lagos State should do or stop doing? Over to you, Jadesimi.
Thank you. Firstly, let me commend Seplat and Dr. Choma and any other company that is voluntarily publishing about their ESG achievements. Transparency and reporting is an important step. I also want to say, I agree with David. I'm going to put it a lot less eloquently when he effectively said sustainability equals profitability. And that's an important concept we need to hang on to. There is a wealth of data now to show that unless you are sustainable in the medium to long term, you probably won't exist. And if you are sustainable in the medium to long term, you will make significantly higher returns than people who aren't. So from a business perspective, there's no question that both the public and the private sector need to embrace sustainability. So overcoming these hurdles isn't just about enabling some private sector actors to make more money. It's about creating an environment that will generate wealth for the state, the country, the continent, and ultimately the world with our African demographic dividend. So in terms of the specific hurdles, there are many, but it's summed up by saying we need a level playing field. If you are importing goods into Nigeria and you are a small company, you need to be given the same consideration and the same access as large companies. If you are a small company in Nigeria employing people, you need to be given the same considerations as large companies. And if you're paying for assistance with training and so on, that needs to actually happen because small companies cannot afford to train their own people. So there are already policies on the books which need to be fully implemented, and there needs to be accountability when they're not implemented fairly and equally to create a level playing field. And what that will do is enable small companies to compete. Well, it will enable them to access a market which they are largely excluded from right now. And it will create a clear distinction between public and private sector actors. And again, this will create vast amounts of wealth for everybody, vastly more wealth than we currently have in Nigeria and certainly in Lagos State. So this is really a win-win. And the last thing I'll say on that, because I know we're short on time, is that as a state, we have to look at the long term. And I'm still, I'm old enough that for me, long term is 20 years. I mean, these days in finance,
Dr. Jadesimi, I think you're on mute. Did somebody click? Yeah, you might.
Sorry, is that better? Okay, sorry.
Yeah, maybe the last 5 seconds, you might need to say that again.
Oh, okay, so I just said we have to look over the development of Lagos State as a sustainable hub, an engine driving business growth across the country and the continent, particularly under the AFCTA, as a long-term project. And long-term is 20 years. Yeah. And if Lagos state policies embrace a level playing field, they embrace long-termism, and they embrace sustainability to lift up and give private sector access to the market, we will see unprecedented levels of wealth creation. Thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Jadesinu. Yeah, indeed, you cited quite robustly. More importantly is the fact that we need to be clear about the messaging that sustainability equals profitability. It's not to be debated, and so being sustainable doesn't mean you're doing people favors, because in the midterm and in the long term, it's coming back to you, in a very profitable way. And I hear you also when you talk about the fact that all of this, Lagos State particularly needs to cultivate that thought process of enabling private sector, not just because, they like to do that, but because of the value inherent for them as a state government or at a subnational level, embedded in the private sector. I think that's really quite a clear message that the state needs to take ownership of. Thank you once again for that insight. And last but not the least, Dr. Gloria Udo, thank you for the first set of insight that you shared. I would like you to talk a bit more about I'd asked that which one of the areas would you seek for Lagos State to prioritize? And you did mention not particularly one. You talked about environment, you talked about energy, and also agriculture. I want you to talk a bit more about the agriculture aspect of it. Again, because I believe that it impacts a lot around a growing population like Lagos State, Nigeria particularly, but Lagos State for the sake of this conversation. What are the areas of agriculture, and how can Lagos State optimally explore agriculture to its sustainable growth and to its sustainable benefits? Over to you. Dr. Gloria Udo is no longer with us. I believe that should be a technology glitch. Is there anybody amongst the audience that would like to talk a bit to that? And if I may guess, concerning my knowledge of some of your initiatives, I would ask. Okay, let me give it back to Dr. Amy Jadesimi. Can you tell us a bit, from your own standpoint, how exactly do you think Lagos State can strategically be impactful or benefit, its residents around agriculture, given the fact that we know that Goal 2 of the Sustainable Development Goals is one of the areas that Nigeria as a whole needs to focus on. It might not be priority for other, countries in the world, but in Nigeria it is a priority. What do you think we can do better as a state government? Over to you.
Thank you. I see that Dr. Udo is back. Do you want to put the question to her?
Dr. Udo.
Yes, yeah. I'm sorry. Okay. Go ahead.
Fine. I know it was technologically. Did you hear the question? Okay, so I talked.
No, I didn't. Can you repeat the question, please?
Earlier. So I'm talking to the agricultural aspects being a priority area that in your earlier conversation, you think Lagos State should maximize or optimally explore. I wanted to hear more about, given particularly the fact that the Sustainable Development Goals, Goal 2, to end hunger in this part of the world, in Africa, can scale or coming into Lagos is a priority area for us. What do you think Lagos State can do better or do less of as far as agriculture is concerned? Over.
Okay, I think part of the challenge of Lagos State is that we tend to look more at the limited land mass, but we forget the very much endowed natural resources around waters. So I see Lagos State as being very well the aquaculture potentials of this country.
Wow.
So, okay, I think I forget the very much endowed natural resources. That is an area that is not well tapped into at all. So I see that if as Lagos State, we can actually work with private sector operators in terms of setting the agenda to say, okay, as in this part of the world, in this part of this nation, how can we tap into fish farming, aquaculture, the whole potential it offers? And if you look at it as well, that ticks the box in terms of all the 5 pillars of sustainable development, because again, you're looking at how we can do more around managing our ecosystems and making them profitable and bringing prosperity. We're also looking at how we can get people more employed. We are also looking at opportunities for partnership. So for me, that is something that Lagos State needs to look at, not minding the fact that it's a very small landmass, where we have plenty of water. We have dams that can be, we have all manners of potentials around the world that is Lagos State to tap into that of the, I see the big for this nation in terms of fishing products.
Right. Wow. I feel like
So
saying
again,
harm.
what I also wanted to add
I think that's very
back to what Dr. Young said is around people. So what I also yeah, I also wanted to add something about behavior modification. It's small landmass. We have taken from what Dr. Young said. If we are going to achieve a sustainable development, there's a lot around what we need to do around behavior modification, because it starts from how we as a people think about it and how we go forward in terms of partnering to meet the goals. If we don't even have that thinking as part of our fishing products, it's around people. From what Dr. Young said, and leave the water and still behave the same. So even ones, even the adults to say, okay, fine, we need to begin to care more, and we need to begin to, in short, strike the balance around the things that bring about sustainable development going forward, particularly for Lagos. That seems to be, we normally joke that Lagos used to be US in terms of the go-to for opportunities. So it still is that for the nation. So that really means that Lagos can actually start and push this agenda forward more than the rest of the nation, and set an example that other nations can, other parts of the nation can learn from. What is that thing that has abundance that can leverage in terms of? So again, what's that in abundance? So that would be my my take on agriculture as it relates to Lagos State and of course on sustainable development. Yeah.
absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Udo. That's quite insightful. Yes, Lagos State is not optimally exploring the marine and the water resources that it has generally. You know, again, I mean, it just sounds like something like a light bulb inside of me right now. I'm really delighted that of that, and I do hope that Lagos City is listening. I mean, imagine that Lagos City is harnessing the water resources for fish and for
Lagos can actually start
marine habitat.
Lagos State and of course on sustainable.
Yeah,
Because I have
as much as the north, you know,
so that would be my.
is exploring the landmass. Interesting. Thank you so much once again, Dr. Gloria Udo, for that insight as far as agriculture is concerned, and for reminding us again about the behavioral perspective. It will be child's play to assume that people will wake up one day and begin to think sustainably. We must take deliberate efforts to impact and to affect our behaviors positively in the sustainability journey. Distinguished panelists, thank you once again for this very espousing and interesting session. What I would like us to do is to formally say this is the end of it, but if there are questions among the panelists, if you have one particular person you want to ask a question, I think this is in the next 5 minutes, we can try to do that. Apologetically, I know that we've exceeded 11:45. Is that a good? Do we agree? Can we please all unmute? Unmute, please. Dr. Amy.
Okay.
Titilola Alabi, Chairman Wanchuku. Dr. Gloria.
Here we are.
Yeah, I've already unmuted.
Yeah, hi, Morris.
Hi there, perfect. You know, it's
Okay.
strange, it's still looking like mute from my, okay, perfect.
Unmuted.
That said, is if we have questions, we want to ask one another, panelists. I think it's been a very interesting session where Lagos State particularly must have benefited from all of the interesting points and highlights that has been discussed in this forum. I also wanted to give the opportunity for us to ask one another questions in the next 5 minutes, if that's fine with us. And if there are no questions, we can call it a day.
Thank you very much, Morris. From me, I think I don't have questions. I enjoyed everybody's contribution, quite revealing. And I like that we all touched at various aspects, touched about assessment from David. I'm surely going to follow up more on you around that. As for us, assessment is very key, and we know is very key for sustainability to achieve its results. There must be assessment. And of course, Gloria has very good points about what could be done instead of the waste, particularly the waste management. It's amazing. I recall going on a trip once, on sustainability trip, and that was at Seychelles, and it was amazing what they were doing with waste. Amazing. You can do cement, you can do building materials, all built out of waste. Waste from hotel bottles, waste from the cans, waste from the beaches, and
You
then
can and then building time. Yeah.
they got the schools to actually take it as a volunteer to go pick up the waste from the beaches and bring it back for it to be turned into a usable product. So there's a lot to learn, and it's important when we have this kind of opportunity for Lagos State as a convener. We believe they are listening to put it into practice. So we'll walk the talk. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that closing remarks. What a good way to close it. Distinguished panelists, once again, it's a pleasure to moderate your session. I've learned a lot, and I hope we've learned from one another. In the absence of any other comments, do have a good day ahead.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.